You've probably heard the term heat soak before and how it's not a good thing for C5 and C6 performance, but what exactly is heat soak? Anytime your LS engine is running, and even for a short period after you shut it off, it's dissipating heat from the engine, from the extra hot headers or exhaust manifolds, and from the radiator into the air directly around those components. And so generally heat soak starts and continues as underhood temperatures rise significantly above what they normally are when you're driving. Heat soak can occur when your LS engine is running but you're moving slow, like in stop and go rush hour traffic. Heat soak can also occur for a certain period of time after you park your Corvette and shut your engine off. So why exactly is heat soak undesirable? Well, first of all, your underhood plastics, electronics, and fluids will all last quite a bit longer if you're able to keep those underhood temps reasonable, as compared to if those temperatures get up to 150, 160 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. Second, and probably more important to us as Corvette enthusiasts, we want the maximum performance and power out of our Corvettes. And I'm sure we've all experienced this heat soak phenomena, like last weekend, for example. When you went to AutoZone, you parked in the lot for 20 minutes, you went inside and got your parts, and when you came out and left the parking lot, your Corvette now feels kind of sluggish, almost like it's a totally different car. So what exactly happens? Why does the engine bay get so heat soaked, and why does a heat soaked engine feel like it's so far down on horsepower? First, since you've been sitting in the parking lot, you no longer have that cool ambient air coming by at 50 miles an hour on average. That kind of partially goes through the engine bay, underneath the engine bay, causes turbulence and helps to dissipate and pull a lot of that heat out of the engine bay. Second is the design of the C5 and the C6 engine bays themselves. They're very small and compact, and with the engine, the exhaust manifolds, and the radiator all dissipating that heat into this engine bay, when you slow down or stop, the temperatures rise very quickly. The C5 and the C6 engine bays are literally just like an oven, especially when you close this door. They're sealed off and the heat literally has nowhere to go. I'm not really positive, but I can only imagine that the GM engineers did all of this sealing to help keep the hood quieter if the car was going down a bumpy road, also to help prevent water infiltration into the engine bay. It really appears to me that the only place that the heat has to go with that hood closed and sealed is through these side fender vents, and of course it dissipates from underneath, but the last time I checked, heat likes to rise, so this doesn't really do much good. Oh, and for those wondering if these fender vents are functional or not, on the C5, as evidenced by my flashlight in the dark test, as you can see on the driver's side, there is a little bit of light that gets through, which means air can as well. And on the passenger side, not as much light, so with the battery and that little compartment area sealed up, not much is getting over there. But on the C6, it looks as though there was quite a bit more effort on both the passenger side and the driver's side to allow heat to dissipate from the engine bay. So exactly how hot does a C6 engine bay get in the real world anyway? Well, I wanted to know, so I did a test to find out. And since the C6 needed gas anyway, I decided to head out to a gas station that was 20 miles away, so it'd get up to full operating temperature, and then on the way back, everything would stabilize so we could evaluate everything when we're back at the shop. The temperature in the shop was about 77 degrees, and as you can see, the exterior of the car and the engine bay were all starting out at about the same temperature. As I left the shop, the computer was reading an air intake temp of 79 degrees, and I proceeded to the gas station at a speed of about 50 miles per hour on average. As I pulled into the gas station about 20 minutes later, the air intake temps had risen to 95 degrees. I filled up with fuel with the engine off, and upon restarting the C6 about 6 minutes later, the intake air temps had jumped by almost 20 to 113 degrees. It's important to note that by this time the outside ambient air temps were about 86 degrees. I proceeded back to the shop, and 20 minutes later the oil temps were at 217 degrees, coolant was at 203, and intake air temp was about 13 above outside ambient air temp of 86 degrees, bringing it to 99. Underhood temps in the upper part of the air filter assembly was at 104 degrees, the coupler to the engine was 113 degrees, and the coil packs were a whopping 160 degrees. Looking down at the lower part of the chamber where the air filter resides, which air could be picked up by a better designed air filter assembly, and temperatures were about 8 degrees cooler towards the bottom at 96 degrees. Then I went ahead and I shut the C6's hood so that we could effectively mimic that 25-minute trip we made to the auto parts store earlier, because I wanted to see exactly how hot the C5 underhood area would get, and here's what we found. After one short minute, the temperature's gone from 99 degrees up to 111 degrees. 7 minutes later, the temperature jumped to 129 degrees. At 15 minutes after the engine was turned off, temperature is all the way up to 138 degrees, and at 24 minutes, it's all the way up to 145 degrees, and on this day, that's the highest it got, as it was still at 145 degrees at 29 minutes after I shut the engine off. Now keep in mind, all of this testing was with the C6 sitting outside, and there was kind of a gentle breeze. I have no doubt that if we had pulled this inside the shop and let it sit where there was no breeze, underhood temps probably would have reached close to 160 degrees or perhaps a little more. So now we've gone ahead and established that underhood temps can easily get to 145 degrees or perhaps more. And I also said earlier in the video that after it's heat soaked and you get in it and drive away, it feels pretty sluggish, almost like it's lost quite a bit of horsepower. So how much horsepower approximately have we lost with that heat-soaked engine? Well, I've always heard, and I believe it might even be part of the SAE standard for correction, that for every 10 degrees of air temperature that you go up or down, it equals about 1% in horsepower. So if that's true, by that guideline, we've lost about 24 horsepower. Additionally, as we covered in this video right here, the LS2 engine is high compression and it knocks easily if conditions are not optimal. In fact, to combat this situation, GM engineers set the factory tune for the LS2 to take out an additional 8 to 10 degrees of timing for 145 degree air versus what the timing advance would be for 90 degree air. Any way you cut it, it's going to be substantial, and I would not be surprised if the LS2 is down somewhere around 40 horsepower when you've got fully heat-soaked 145 degree air. But of course, I can't prove that. Where's the mobile dyno when you need one? Now, to be crystal clear, of course the heat soak condition is temporary and it'll clear itself if you let the car sit long enough or if you drive it long enough with sustained airflow to bring those underhood temperatures back down to normal. So how long does that take? Well, I wanted to find out as well, so as soon as I was done with the testing that left our underhood temps at 145 degrees, I took the C6 for a ride to find out. As a reminder, the outside air temperature was at 87 degrees, and so I hopped into the C6 and started it. The oil temp was down to 190 degrees, coolant temperature at 201, and after 20 seconds or so of running, the intake air temps were down to 140 degrees. And for this test, I just kept the scanner going, and I was basically at speeds between 30 and 55 miles per hour. Under these conditions, it took 7 minutes to get the intake air temps down to 110 degrees. And it took 10.5 minutes to get the intake air temps down to a more reasonable 100 degrees. So what exactly is the point of all this? Well, first of all, I just wanted to confirm the suspicions of most of you that have taken your car for a ride and then had a hot restart, that yes, the phenomenon of heat soak is in fact a real thing. Second, I wanted to explain specifically what's going on when heat soak takes place behind the scenes or under the hood, as it were, and how long does heat soak last? And third, even though heat soak is not something that you absolutely have to do something about, if you're a performance junkie and you want to increase your C6's performance and diminish the negative effects of heat soak on your LS engine, we're going to talk about a few things you can do to help out your situation. So here are 5 things that you can do to minimize heat soak in your Corvette, starting with cheap and easy to expensive and drastic. First, if you're at a drag strip or an autocross or even at your own house or a buddy's, the obvious thing to do is simply open your hood and let the heat out. Second, if you're going to park somewhere where it's not practical to open up your hood, be sure to park away from buildings and other cars so they don't block your wind, and also align your car so that it's faced into the wind, allowing that air to come through the radiator and get at that air intake tract to cool it down. My favorite thing to do, and the first thing I do to any of my Corvettes, is to turn the temperature down at which the fans come on by about 25 degrees. Most people are not aware, but the stock tune on C5 Corvettes doesn't even trigger the first fan to come on until about 226 degrees, so I drop that down to about 203 degrees. For more effective ways to lower your coolant temps, check out this video. The stock LS2 air intake system is pretty efficient, but unfortunately it grabs air from way up high in the engine bay, and physics tells us that's going to be the hottest air. A quality aftermarket cold air intake system will reach down further into that front bay area, and it'll absolutely pick up colder air. And lastly, and this is for the hardcore group out there, get out your cutoff tool and make some holes in your C6's hood so you can install a few vents, allowing that heat to get out of the engine bay. Now, in my humble opinion, the C6 and the C5 hoods are so beautiful, they would have to be dedicated track toys before I would resort to getting this thing out. And guys, that's gonna do it for this one. Since you made it this far, tap that thumbs up button, and most of all, thanks for watching.